Welcome back to another edition of the Friday Golf Podcast. I am Andy Johnson, your host, and I have another edition of the Yolk with Doak. This is one of my favorite podcast series that we've done. Big thanks to Tom for all the time over the years. We haven't done one in a while. We've both been really busy, and it was great to catch up with Tom in Traverse City for a couple days. We recorded a couple episodes. This one will obviously is airing now. The next one will be next week. So next Thursday, the second part of our conversation will be up. Just to give you an idea, this episode kind of dives into all of Tom's new projects, and the second episode is a listener Q&A. So big thanks to Tom, and super exciting to see some of his new projects. I saw High Point last week. Saw Sedge last year. I'm going to see it again this year, and need to see kind of the wave of new projects coming to life. Before we get to Tom, let's talk about Golf Forever. They are one of our partners. This is a really great product, and you don't need to necessarily take it from me. My uncle is he's a very good player, and I've always wondered, as he's kind of moved into elder years, not elder, I mean, he's still young at heart, but as he's kind of aged, he's kept his distance. Like, it's kind of crazy. He's a long hitter, and I've always wondered, like, how is he keeping up? He sent me a text the other day. He said, hey, I see you at Golf Forever as a sponsor. I've been using the program for a couple years now. It's really good stuff. The middle back tees workouts are serious. This explains a lot. He's like super flexible, and he's stayed in really good shape, really good golf shape, and that's what's kept his distance and allowed him to like not really slip up over the years in terms of speed and golf game. So I've been really a big fan of this. I just started taking it on the road with me so I could stay, kind of like keep a regimen while I travel. It's been super awesome. If you want to get this, like, kind of like it's an at-home training system. It combines world-class coaching and personal follow-along video programs. So it's really easy to do. It's a great way to stay in golf shape. More flexibility, more speed. It just makes swinging a golf club easier. So if you want to get started, go to golfforever.com and use the code EGG to save an extra $50 on any training system package. That's golfforever.com, code EGG. Big thanks to Golf Forever. This has been an awesome addition to my kind of fitness and life strategy. So check it out. Works for my uncle, works for me. Completely different age buckets, and really great program. Let's get to Tom Doak.
All right, Tom, we're back. Another edition of the Yolk with Doak. It's been a little while. I feel like both of us have been on the road a little bit, but it's exciting. It's exciting to do this in person. We haven't done one in person in a while. Where all have you been this year?
Well, first I want to mention I'm home for a change. We're actually in my house, which is even rare for me, much less for visitors. But yeah, I've had a busy year. Since the 1st of January, I've finished 3 new golf courses. We had started in South Florida and we had started in Texas before the end of last year, but we built and signed off on all 18 holes in both of those. I went back over to Scotland just a month ago and finished the last 10 holes of Cabot Highlands, and Clyde still has a bunch of work to do to put those all to bed and get them all grassed before the end of this year, but my work's pretty much done, other than going over there during grow-in and figuring out mowing lines and what parts to have open sand and what parts to do more landscaping to. And then I've opened Pinehurst number 10 opened Sedge Valley. Didn't go to an event for Sedge Valley. Opened the first 9 holes at High Point. The other will open in a month or two. So that's a really productive year.
Seriously. I guess, when you're building these courses, when you sign off, when you're done doing the construction work, is it a wave of satisfaction? Do you get sad that it's kind of over? Like, how does like kind of just the feeling of a project, like the ebbs and flows of these projects, how do do you have a favorite, and is it a sad part when it's over?
The only time I remember really feeling kind of sad was when we were building Pacific Dunes, because it was so exciting to be doing it. And it was like, we did take a break there in the summer for a little while because it gets so dry in the summer. You just, everything blows away before you can put the irrigation in. But we worked from like January to June, and we came back September to November. So we were pretty much working on it the whole year with the break in the middle. And, obviously it was a special place and a special project, and everything been going well. And when we got that last hole done, it was kind of a shock that we were done that fast in some ways. And we didn't, I didn't have a bunch of other work lined up next and know what I was going to do. So, that was like, oh, wow. Okay. But usually, construction is a grind. It takes 9 months to build a golf course, sometimes a little less, sometimes more, but that's the average. Long days. You're away from home. A lot of the cool places that we've worked that are really cool places to go hang out now were tiny little towns with not too much choice of other things to do or places to eat when we were building those places. There's a lot of them that had like 2 options, and they weren't very good. So you're kind of like a pioneer, and that's what my crew has to go through. For me, I come in for a week at a time, and everybody's energized when I'm there, and we're really being creative, and we're going to get 4 or 5 holes done. And, for me, the travel part is hard, but the actual time I spend on site is really cool. And I'm working with people I love, and we're doing creative things. So the whole way through, you're just really energized. And honestly, when you get to the end, now it's a relief, because I have, I just explained how much work I've been doing now. Okay, check. That one's done. I don't have to worry about that for a while. On to the next one. The really weird part is when you go back for Pinehurst number 10 for their, they didn't do a grand opening the day they started playing. They had me come back for a media day just before the US Open. And, all the writers there are like, well, how excited are you about this project? And it's like, I was excited like a year ago. This has been over for me kind of for a long time now. And I'm working on 4 other cool things. So that's weird, because the press attention doesn't line up with my experience of the projects. It lines up with the client's experience of them, but not with what I actually do.
It seems to me like maybe, and this is me just thinking of you, is maybe the most exciting part is when you get the topo map and you start trying, like that very initial wave of trying to figure out what you're going to do.
Yeah, sometimes. That's like all, there's 2 parts. There's that part, and then there's the let's go build some greens part. And I love them both. They're very different. The playing around with the topo map is much more personal, and usually for walking around on site, I'll probably only have one of my associates with me for that to try to figure out the puzzle. And that's really cool too. And, occasionally you're working on a piece of land that's so good, when you're done with that, you're almost like, this thing's almost done. Now we just have to build some greens and we'll be done. But other times there's a lot more work to do than that.
With so much going on, you open 3 courses, you're finishing 3 courses. I imagine it's put kind of like it's been a unique couple years of just managing your team and working with your team. And I think one of the things that happens with architects, and I think it's probably a lot of the recent years, you guys have become like, you've become golf celebrities, like huge celebrities. And I think that's like the last 20 years, architectures continue to gain popularity. But like the people on your team are so vital to that. And how has the challenge been of managing, working with your people, you know, with all the stuff going on?
Well, I mean, to address the one part first, yeah, I mean, I get recognized in airports sometimes now, and it kind of freaks me out because I don't really, I don't live for that. I like the work. I don't like the, I don't handle praise well, so I don't know what to do when people come up to me and tell me how much they like this place or that place. I've gotten better, but it's still awkward for me sometimes. The managing my team part, it's interesting because like 4 years ago, I told them, I'm turning 60. I'm not going to have a payroll forever. So I'm giving you guys the company, and you're kind of independent now, and you're going to, I'm not doing consulting anymore. You guys decide for yourselves how much of that you want to do. And, and I'm still going to work with you on all my new projects, and I hope you're not too busy to work on them. But I don't get to manage them so much. And that's been the one part of it that's actually been kind of harder the last 2 or 3 years, is just don't always have everybody lined up right when I need them to be there. Because because they got kids and they got lives, and they've got another place they got to be that I have nothing to do with now. So it's not always that easy from that perspective. That's, I knew that was a trade-off I was going to have to make if I did it the way I did it, but they're all thriving too. So I think overall it's been really good, but it's kind of weird to be working with different people sometimes just because of the way the schedules are lining up. Like I'm making a trip to Punta Brava in a couple of weeks, and I just found out like my grandkids are all going to be here when I was going to be away. So I'm trying to change the date. And that means I'm changing the date for like 3 other people too. And I was going to be in Europe that week. And it's like, well, okay, when can we all be there? Let's regroup and figure it out. So that's tricky. Fortunately, I don't waste a lot of my own time worrying about it, but I'm not like, I'm not quite like, if I was Jack Nicklaus, I'd be like, I'm going to be there July 12th. You all better be there. My life's a little different than that.
You talked about new people, like working with some new people. You guys have, I would say since we started doing the podcast, some new fresh faces. Like, is it energizing to get just different perspectives, new ideas? Has it, I know like Brian Zager, Parker Anderson are new people that you've been working a lot with. Like, how has it been working with new associates? I don't know if you'd call them associates, if that's the right word.
Yeah, I don't know what the right word is. I mean, they've been lead associate for different jobs, so associate is fine. I've done it my whole career. I mean, if you look at my best golf courses, at one point when I had like 5 courses in the top 100, there were like 5 different lead associates. I don't know what it is now. A couple of them have more than one. I know that, but I don't know exactly how it shakes out. But yeah, I mean, Clyde Johnson and Angela Moser and Blake Conant have all been working with us for like 10, 12 years. And, they've been ready to be the lead associate or do something on their own for a while. It's just like, if you're doing 2 courses a year and you got 3 or 4 great people ahead of them, you're not going to make the junior person the lead associate. That happened quickly for Brian Schneider when he did Barnbougle, because everybody was at Cape Kidnappers, and then the rest of them were all ready to go home, and he was just newly married. He's like, yeah, I'll go there and run that. And, so that was a good chance for him. And you just never know when it's going to come. It took a long time to get around to, okay, Eric and Brian are already booked up with other things. So Angela's going to be the one to run Pinehurst number 10. but and Brian Zager was my guy for Sandglass in Florida, because it was very complex. We had to change the world there, and we had to do it with very meticulous plans, and he was the right guy for that. So yeah, it's interesting, but I like working with a variety of people. Even though I think a lot of my best work has the same 3 or 4 guys shaping most of the greens. It's great to see somebody new get on a bulldozer and build something that makes the cut. And, I don't have to bring in Eric to edit the last 3 greens before we're done.
So your new project that we've talked about, you've brushed on Sandglass, Childress Hall in Texas,
mm-hmm.
and Cabot Highlands
mm-hmm.
in Scotland. What excites you? Maybe like one thing that excites you about each of them?
Sandglass, we've really kept the wraps on what we were doing the whole time. So I'm really curious to see what people's reaction is to the golf course. The one thing I can promise is it's different from what anybody else is trying to do down there. You almost have to suspend disbelief a little bit when you drive through the gate, but I think it's a pretty good golf course, and I'm interested to see what people think of it. And there's going to be some questions about how we did what we did and why we did what we did, which is fine, but I don't really want to give away too much more than that. Honestly, that's the way the clients wanted to handle it, and I'm fine with that. Let people actually decide for themselves after they see it. Childress Hall, the funny thing is, when I went down there to look at the piece of land the first time, this would have been 2.5 years ago now. Brian Zager and I flew down. The client met us and flew us the rest of the way to a tiny little regional airport that's 10 minutes from the site.
It's in kind of almost the panhandle of Texas.
That kind of north. It's just below that north Top Hat part of Texas. So 3.5 hours.
Top Hat's a better
3.5 hours west of Dallas, northwest of Dallas. And very much the middle of nowhere, like Sand Hills and Ballynear, the middle of nowhere, except there is a major US highway that's kind of the truck route from Dallas to Denver. So if you drive from Dallas, there's big trucks the whole way. But I didn't experience that the first time. We just landed and went out and looked at this site, and it was dunes. It's the same kind of dunes you find in the Sandhills. They're kind of all along the Red River. So it's not as huge an expanse as the Nebraska Sandhills by any means. It's only 2 or 3 miles either side of the river, maybe. But the first site, the site that we went out to look at, which was a property that was for sale, it was cool. It was really good land for golf. It just didn't have a lot of features that was okay, that piece looks really different, and that's the perfect place for a couple. I want to put a couple holes over here. I want to put some holes over on this part of the land that's really different. It was kind of all similar. And we spent most of our day out there. We went and had a late lunch at this place in town, and the conversation was, "Are we going to get back on the plane?" And one of the guys had said, "Well, there's another site we kind of looked at. It's not really for sale, but the guy seemed like he'd talk about it." And everybody was like, "Should we do that?" And I raised my hand why would we not do that while we're here? And so we drove up there, in fact, 15 minutes out of town to get up there. And from the moment we drove in, I just loved the site. We drove in late in the afternoon when the light was really good and the contours really showed off. But, we drove in on contours that reminded me a little of St. Andrews Beach. And then when you got up on the dunes, there was a long view to the west, and you saw the river coming kind of around the site, and it was bigger dunes. And I was like, okay, this place, This place has what the other one didn't. It has a variety of different settings within 18 holes.
The variety of settings, I think like most people, if they just saw dunes, sand, it's like, oh, this is perfect for golf.
Right.
What does the variety of settings really lend and allow you to do as an architect?
I mean, you're kind of choreographing the feel of things as you go. I mean, the best example is Cypress Point. You start out, play across the road. You're kind of in, that second hole's kind of up on a shelf. Then you get back into the back part of the land with all the trees and stuff. You pop out for 8 and 9 or their own little world up there with a great view over everything. You go back into the trees. You come out, and then like 12, 13 is kind of linksy, is, more linksy than anything else there. And then you get to the point. That's like 5 different environments in 18 holes. And I should not compare anything that I'm working on right now to Cypress Point, but Childress Hall has a bunch of different settings. There's canyons, and there's big sand dunes, and there's gentle stuff, and there's little pockets, and sometimes you're seeing quite a bit of golf at once, and sometimes you're just seeing the hole you're on, and it's a neat variety.
Yeah, variety is wonderful. I found myself, I was playing Oakland Hills the other day, and I think like all the attention's always on those holes right at the start.
Yeah.
You're in like right at the front of the clubhouse, like 11 and 10 and 9 and 1, and I found myself like on 5, and there's just these nice like kind of more gentle ridges, and I was like, it's really nice over here. And nobody ever talks about that,
right?
But it's just the variety, right? Like feeling like you're in a new space. It's almost like a house. Like you don't want every room to feel the same, right?
Right. And yeah, I mean, a great golf course, every hole is different than the next hole, and if the spaces feel different to start, then you're not as worried about making sure that this hole is only 420 yards where that other one was 450, because you just wouldn't even think of comparing the two holes. They're so different.
I've been wondering this, and I was thinking about it while we were at High Point yesterday. How did working with Brooks Koepka, now that you're a few years removed, has that had a lasting impact, that Memorial Park project, just working in the, thinking about PGA Tour golf and thinking about challenging the best players in the world at like, it was the first time you really built a golf course for that purpose. Has that changed how you approach designs since then, just in any way? Like, are there some general themes that from that project that you feel have carried through your work?
Well, I mean, both Memorial Park and the Ren-ay-sons Club now having the Scottish Open on a regular basis. I get a lot of feedback on that too, and I've spent a lot of time talking to Padraig Harrington. They hired him as a consultant, kind of as a go-between between all the players and getting their feedback, and then filtered through him and kind of what he thinks of their feedback. And he's funny and dead honest about it. He's like, well, if you wanted to be a hero to the players, you do this, but I know that's not what you want to do.
Well, the players would love if everything was just as fair as possible.
But it's been a learning process, because even for the longest time, I just spent a day with Padraig and the client and a couple of people from the PGA Tour and the European Tour the week before the Scottish Open while I was over for Cabot Highlands. And, all this time I've been designing things, thinking about trying to do things that are going to affect how the decision the guy makes on the tee. Like, we added a bunker to the right of the first fairway to try to make guys think, okay, there's not just all the room in the world out here. I've got to flirt with that bunker. I got to lay up from it, or I got to go left of it. And now I'm maybe dealing with rough, and there's a pine tree short of the green that might be in the way. And I thought we had that all well worked out. And we go back this year, and Padraig says, well, there's a lot of guys that are really bothered by the fact that right of this bunker on the first hole, there's about 20 yards of pretty gentle rough before you get to gorse bush. And I figured with the gorse bush, nobody's going to play into that space deliberately, and they're not. But they're really bothered if they hit the ball in the fairway bunker and their opponent hits the ball in between the fairway bunker and the gorse bush. They're like, that's not fair. It has nothing to do with how they're trying to play the hole. It's just, for the players, they would rather straight down the beeline of how you're supposed to play the hole is a highway. And, not necessarily every hole has to be straight, but there should be a highway for them to play to, and all trouble if you're off the highway.
I think generally for tournament players, the ideal thought in their head of how a golf course should interact with them is that if I hit it straight, I'm rewarded, and then every yard off of ideal is met with more penalty.
Yes.
So the idea, if I'm 50 yards off or 20 yards off, 20 yards is way better than 50. It's inconceivable. I think this is their issue a lot of times with centerline bunkers. Like, I hit it straight down the middle, and I'm in a bunker, but they want to have very black and white. I executed the shot, and anything that disrupts that, but it's fascinating because you play their courses that they play, and inevitably where the fans are is a great place to miss, and that's always way off the fairway.
No, and you can't build all golf courses like you just described, because if every yard off the center line you're more and more penalized, 3/4 of us would just have to give up playing. And the tour players understand that. They're not stupid. They play with people in pro-ams. They know how their dad plays. So it's not that they think what you're doing is bad design, but they think it's unfair from that very narrow band that they're in. And they think in a very narrow band. It's like, if I carry the ball 285 and I successfully get over a bunker at 280, that should work out perfectly. But that's how narrow their thinking is. They're not even thinking. They know very well that there's guys that hit it 265, that bunker, they can't even try to hit it over that bunker. And there's guys that hit it 305, and that bunker is meaningless to those guys. But they still, it's so centered around how far they hit it. And if they hit it perfectly, then that should be rewarded.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's nothing that frustrates good tournament players more than when they feel like they've executed a shot and it leads to a bad result, which, to a certain extent, I think is the humor of golf design.
No, but I think what bothers them more, honestly, is when they've executed a good shot and then somebody else gets away with a bad shot. That's the part that bothers them. That's the thing I was describing about maybe putting another bunker over there to the right on that first hole. It's like, that's just gonna punish the members.
Yes.
But the tour pro will feel better about it if somebody else hits it in that bunker. They never worry about, the bunker that we built is really nasty. If you're in it, you can have trouble going for the green from 130 yards. But they're fine with that. It's like, they know that bunker is there, and if they mess up and go in it, they are fine with that.
How can you get the impact of bunkers, like the pot bunkers, with not building pot bunkers? To me, it seems like and maybe it's just the American mentality on bunkers, but to me, it seems like every year when I
watch the Open or if I go over there and play, there's like, I'm terrified of bunkers, and it like impacts my strategy, the way I play a golf course so much more because of the, you know, the impact and like the penalty associated with them. They're
Right.
actually hazards.
Right. And, you know, Brooks Koepka was very clear the first day I talked to him in Houston. He's like, the only place fairway bunkers matter at all to us is in Scotland because they're penal. And if you get in one, you might not be able to hit it on the green. He's like, anywhere in the States, if I hit it enough, if a fairway bunker and I've got 180 yards left and it's a clean lie, that's really not any different from being in the fairway. And the face is never going to be so high and so close that I got to worry about getting out of the bunker with an 8-iron or a 9-iron in my hands. So either make them really severe or why have them?
At Cabot, are you going to have like pop bunkers there?
Only a few.
Only a few.
You know, we didn't want to, you know, you have to rebuild those things every like 3 or 4 years. So it's a pretty expensive ongoing assignment to do them. And plus, you know, we're struggling a little bit at the Ren-ay-sons Club. When they rebuild them all, we're not there.
Mm-hmm.
And they kind of go their own direction, and you know, they evolve from year to year, and they're not necessarily evolving for the better all the time. I'm trying to get on top of that now, but most places they just keep getting rounder and deeper and nastier and higher faces, and it's like, no, let's have more variety than that. But you know, that's a process. It takes a few days, and the guys who shaped the bunkers originally are long gone by the time they're doing that work. So you've really got to have a crew on site that's good at it and keeps getting better at it. You know, Muirfield has that. St. Andrews has that. Nearly everywhere else, they don't have that. And the bunkers, you know, they're penal, but they're not really good looking at all or interesting. They all look the same. Mm-hmm. So, you know, I've thought a lot about it. We started both at Sandglass and at Childress Hall with the idea that we were going to do more of those kind of bunkers. We've done more of that at Sandglass than we have at Childress. We kind of got away from it at Childress a little bit. There's some really penal bunkers there, but there's not a bunch of sidewall bunkers. Mm-hmm. We haven't done the sidewall yet at Sandglass. We're going to see if we can get the effect without actually doing that. You know, there's going to be a very, very steep face, but just grass growing on the face, and we'll see how that goes. And we might decide later on to change that on some of the holes. But, you know, we didn't, if you're going to do them there, you're probably going to do the artificial turf sod walls, because sod walls in Florida will burn up right away. Yeah. And client was uncomfortable with those. And you know, the artificial sod wall bunker, that material is a little hard to work with. And if it is going to last for 10 or 15 years, then you got to get it right the first time. You know, if you spend the money to build it and it doesn't look great, you're kind of stuck with it. So we want, I mean, if we ever do go that way in Florida, we want to have the thing exactly the shape we want it, so we can tell the contractor that is the shape and the face is exactly that high before it bevels off and there's turf rolling into it.
What's your favorite part about working in Scotland when you get to spend this like 3-4 weeks at a time in Scotland? You're obviously working a ton, but
obviously, I honestly, this last trip is the only time I've really had a chance to do more than like a day of golf on top of my trip. Partly because you know, every time I go over there, the Ren-ay-sons Club wants me to talk about what they're going to do to the golf course next year. So it's like 2 or 3 days down there. The good news is I get to see North Berwick and or Muirfield a lot while I'm there. But I've been kind of going to the same places. So this trip was a little different. You know, we had a lot of holes to finish on this trip. The irrigation crew is in behind us, so I had to get a couple holes finished early, and then I had some more time before Ben Cowan-Dewar was coming in at the back end of my trip. So in the middle, I did go down to the Ren-ay-sons Club and have a meeting, but I also went out to the West Coast and looked at a bunch of different courses, a couple I'd seen years ago and a couple I'd never seen, and just, got back into Scottish golf a little bit, which was great.
What were the takeaways? What were the highlights? What were some of the places that you saw that you thought differently about?
I saw the extreme ends of golf in Scotland. I saw Iona, which is almost a completely natural course, which hardly maintained at all by anybody, just grazed animals, and just played by the locals. It's really not set up. There's no green fee at all. You can pay $1 to get a scorecard, but at the post office in town, but you got to walk out there and there's no signs or directions or anything. You just play golf. And then Ardfin at the extreme other end, developed by an Australian billionaire on his estate, and originally just for him, but he built a little lodge so that a few people could go play it. I saw him like 3 days apart with Machrihanish and the Macri in between. And then we went up to Durness from when we got finished with our work at Castle Stewart like a day before the client got there. So we drove from Inverness up to Durness in the way far northwest corner to play the 9 holes up there, and came right back.
I think like my answer always, it changes every time I go, but from this trip, what would be the one thing you would take back from this trip if you could bring it to America?
Iona was a great experience. I don't know how you could do anything like that in America, quite honestly.
I was going to ask if you thought that would be feasible.
I've actually talked to the client at Childress Hall about, they've talked vaguely about doing a third golf course someday that would be more public access. And they had me look at a site a little away from the other two that's flatter and along the river more, but this cow's grazing it now. I was like, oh, that could be like Brora or one of those places. Just put the wire fence around the greens and do that. And it's hard to explain that to most clients. Like I tried to get Julian Robertson interested in doing that 25 years ago as a second course for Cape Kidnappers, which they're actually talking about now. Like they might think about doing something like that. So but it's such a remove from the super high end luxury thing to grazed fairways and poop all over the fairways, that it's just a culture shock. And yet at the same time, when Rick Kane, a few years after we built Taraiti, was going on a trip to the UK with a friend of his and their wives, and he was like, can you like pick out a handful of courses that we could play that I wouldn't have played before? And, Rick's one of those guys who's played all the top 100 courses. So I was like, almost anywhere I sent him, I'm like, no, he would have played there already. So I finally settled on the southwest of England, St. Enodoc, Saunton, and Westward Ho. And Westward Ho is grazed and there's poop everywhere. I was like, I
didn't get rollout on that drive. It landed in the poop.
And I was like, that was the one. I was like, can I send a billionaire guy and his wife there? And what are they going to think about that? The wives loved it. They thought it was by far their favorite thing that they did. Partly because the golf course isn't super hard. It's fairly open, because when a golf course is grazed, there's no real fairways. It's just like most of the grass is short because that's the animals are grazing all of it that's edible. There's a line in Mackenzie's book about that. He says at the great schools of golf like St. Andrews and Hoylake, there's no defined line between the fairways and rough. And I read that for years. Like, how the hell could that be? Somebody's mowing where the fairway ends. No, on the early golf courses or a place like Brora, there's not really a fairway. there's not an edge to the fairway. It just kind of bleeds out into the native.
It's you know, I think the thing that you hit on with sending them out there was that people crave like unique experiences.
Yeah, 100%.
And I think this is like one of the things that frustrates me is like everybody pushes to be like in the same box.
Right.
With maintenance,
right? You're defining like what a top 100 golf course is you got too many criteria for what it is, and you have to throw all these things out. And then, you know, the people want what's not in that box. Just, they want to see something different than what everybody's trying to build.
Yeah. And it's funny, like the standard, like there's like the standards of maintenance that has like that. What it does is it just creates a sameness to everything, right?
And to circle back to what we were talking about with bunkers earlier, I mean, I remember 40 years ago, you know, bunker sand was not the same from one course in the States to the next. And some of them were like notorious, like Southern Hills had some kind of river sand in the bunkers that was just, you couldn't hit a good bunker shot. You know, it was really hard to spin the ball out of them at all. So the bunkers were penal, and you had to stay the hell away from them more than on a typical parkland course. You know, now everybody's doing a $15 million redo and trucking sand in from the same quarry in Ohio all over the country to have perfect sand bunkers that are not penal.
And then it's the same rough. It's like there's like this same aesthetic that comes from that big renovation. It's like a newness to it, and it's a bummer because like part of what makes it. I think about this when I go to Sand Valley. I struggled so much out of Sand Valley's bunkers because there's like a heaviness to the sand. There's like a depth in it, and then one day I switched to 56, and the bounce was like working for me versus my lob wedge, which I usually use out of every bunker. And it was like, oh, like I had to like figure out how to hit a bunker shot.
Right. You know, we for Childress Hall, the client and the superintendent were absolutely convinced that they're going to have to bring a bunch of sand in from off-site for the bunkers. And we're like, you can play out of exactly what we just dug right there. The sand is good. It's just, it's different. And I don't even carry a sand wedge. I play everything with a pitching wedge because I play in different kinds of sand, and that you can kind of play differently and make it work. But with a sand wedge with a lot of bounce on it, sometimes some of the courses I play that wouldn't work very well.
Yeah.
And so we finally got, you know, we kept trying to get the client to go to Ballyneal to see what that was like, because it's the same kind of sand and it's the same, you know, we didn't bring any sand in there either. And he's a busy guy, and he wasn't getting out there, and then it was winter for most of the time. We're building the golf course, so you're not going to go to Ballyneal in March to figure it out. So finally we just got him out there one day on the bunker on the 7th hole, and it's like, well, yeah, chuck 5 balls in there and try playing wedges. In the first 2 or 3, he's trying to play with a sand wedge and he wasn't getting out. And I was like, oh, this is going to end badly. We're going to have to spend a bunch of money on bunker sand. And then it's like, try a pitching wedge. And it's, you know, the light went on and he started being able to hit balls out of it and control it a little bit. He's like, yeah, that's fine. That's all we need. I was like, you know, I think we saved him $500,000 with that 20 minutes of hitting practice bunker shots. And, you know, in the end, the bunkers are going to be a little harder for it, which is, that's the other value to me. If you're in a bunker there, it's not going to be an automatic up and down for a good player.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. We shouldn't be rooting for balls to go in bunkers. It's a bad sign for the game if you're rooting for balls to go in hazards. You brought up North Berwick. I don't think we've ever talked. Racking my brain. I don't think we've ever really talked much about North Berwick. Obviously, I think it's 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 become one of the world's most revered and loved courses. You say you visit a lot often when you're visiting the Ren-ay-sons Club. What are the things that you think about the most about North Berwick?
Oh, I mean, I have a long history with that place. You know, after I lived in St. Andrews for 2 months, that's the first place I went. I stayed in North Berwick for like a week or two to see all the golf courses around there. But I was staying right in town. And in 1982, North Berwick was kind of a rundown town, and I wish I'd had a little money and like known to invest in real estate. Oh God. Yeah. There are several towns in the UK I'd have made a killing in. You know, North Berwick was never on anybody's radar as a great golf course. It was too short and too easy, and good players didn't respect it that much. It was nowhere on the top 100 list. Nobody even thought about putting it in the top 100. And every good player that I talked to after that, like when we looked at doing the Ren-ay-sons Club the first time in the late 90s, that was when John Ashworth was looking at doing a project there. And John and his buddy had been living over there for a while. They played Gullen and Muirfield and those courses all the time, and they never would go to North Berwick. They thought it was too easy. And I'm like, I mean, yeah, you can shoot a lower score, but there's a bunch of really good golf holes there. And that's probably the course that is the single course that its reputation has changed the most over that 40-year period. You know, National Golf Link's kind of the same thing for the same reasons, but National was at one time considered one of the great courses in America. North Berwick was always considered a great place in the UK, but, you know, it doesn't host the Open Championship. It's, you know, it's short and it's got some really quirky holes, and all those famous holes, except for the Redan, nearly all the famous holes are really short par fours that are almost drivable when the wind's blowing a different direction. So, you know, I always thought it was a great place. And when I wrote about it in the confidential guide pretty reverentially, everybody was like, yeah, I kind of like that place. Why doesn't it get more acclaim? And, you know, now I look at it and I think, well, it's got so much more water view than any of the championship links courses. I mean, you're right. You're playing along the beach the first 2 or 3 holes, and again at the far end. And, you know, that's obviously a big factor in ratings now that it wasn't nearly so much 30, 40 years ago. 30 years ago was about how testing is the golf course for scratch players, the Golf Digest system of voting. So North Berwick's reputation has changed entirely, even though that whole time the pit and the Redan and the 16th hole with that crazy green and the second hole playing over the beach have been some of the most famous holes in Scotland. And everybody would have told you, oh yeah, there's some great holes there. But by the same token, they would have told you, oh, the first hole is just like a 6-iron off the 6-iron wedge par 4. That's kind of silly. And the funny thing is that's grown into a great hole, because now you could actually try to hit a driver on it. You could try to carry where the fairway cuts off and you go up the hill, and you could try to fly it up there on the green. You'd be crazy to do it. But
yeah, especially after a few swings in their warm-up net.
Yeah.
You take a couple cuts in the warm-up net and then try and drive the screen up on right along the beach.
But I love playing the golf course, and it's, you know, I've shot even par there. Not lately, but I play much better there compared to a typical round anywhere else. And when we were building the Ren-ay-sons Club, at the start of it, I went to the pro and said, you know, I'm going to have like 4 or 5 people here working on this golf course. It's just going to be dying to play some golf. You know, this place is like $100 a round now. Is there, you know, can we work out some deal where they're like temporary members for the summer, temporary members, something. So they took me in to see the secretary of the club, and, you know, and they all knew that I'd written a lot of nice things about the golf course over the years, and it probably helped them out a little bit. And the secretary thought about it for a minute, and he said, Well, we stop having tee times at 6 o'clock. Why don't you know, just after 6, you could just play golf as much as you want. That was seriously, you know, no, you don't have to pay us to be members. Just after 6 o'clock, just go out and play. Nobody's going to stop you. And, you know, we would play 18-hole matches after work from 6 p.m. to 9 and be finishing and just playing that 18th hole where you could just see the clock on the clubhouse and kind of aiming toward that. You couldn't really see where the ball finished, and you'd have to walk up by the green to find it. Unless you hit a car, you'd hear that. And just, you know, that was by a factor of 5, the best like residual golf while we were building a golf course of anything we've ever had. So all of my crew that worked on that thing is just North Berwick's like the most special place in the world to them.
It's that the closing stretch there. I mean, it's one of the great match. Like when you think about just match play culture over there, but like that closing stretch is so fun. If you're not, you know, like a lot of what we've talked about with it is like you've talked about is like how it wasn't hard enough. But if you're just playing a match,
Right.
that closing stretch is about as exhilarating of a set of shots and situations that you can be put in to try and close someone out.
Mm-hmm. And even that last hole, and I built a hole very similar to that last hole at Sandglass for the 15th hole. The 15th hole comes back to the clubhouse at Sandglass. Then there's a little 3-hole loop at the end. And I built like a super short drivable par 4, just like that. That shit, everybody's going to look at it like this is like the easiest hole in the world. But, you know, hopefully they're not just all card and pencil and, you know, playing matches, and they'll get that like playing a match. It's like the last time I played a match there, my partner drove the green on the 18th hole. Everybody else was a little short. Then he 3-putted and we didn't win the hole, and we wound up losing the match on the 18th hole by just, you know, there's real pressure to make a 3 from 285 yards is not that easy to do, even if there's absolutely nothing in your way.
And with the cars on the right,
Yeah.
you're gonna
Nothing in your way but out of bounds, and we've got the driveway coming into the club as the out of bounds in the same place.
That's fun. Well, we're gonna come back with listener questions in the next episode of this podcast. Tom, thanks for being on, and we'll be back in about a week with listener Q&A here for this podcast.
All right, big thanks to PJ Clark for editing and producing this podcast, and of course to Tom for joining us. We will be back on Tuesday. I think the plan is to have a little amateur golf talk and a women's Olympics talk with Garrett and Joseph are going to be on, and then the second edition of the Yolk with Doak will be back on Thursday of next week. Hey, we've got some stuff going on in the pro shop. We have a sale. Buy 2 hats, get 1 free. We've got a huge selection of hats in the pro shop. We also have some new T-shirts. We have a St. Andrews themed T-shirt that's really cool. Cameron Hurtis did illustration on the back of it. It's got like part of the routing back there. And then also our potato chips greens T-shirt, which I love. It's a bag. It's like kind of like a bag of potato chips with all these greens that look like potato chips coming out. Really cool T-shirts. If you want to check those out, go to proshop.thefriedegg.com. Use the promo code HATS to get that buy 2, get 1 free discount. Thanks to Tom. Thanks to you guys for listening. And we'll be back next week with 2 more episodes of the Fried Egg Golf Podcast.